Endless Hustle presented by Cardon. If you're like me and you're noticing dark circles under your eyes, wrinkles creeping up, or breakouts, then Cardon is the best solution for you. Cardon is an effective skincare system for men. Cardon uses cactus extract in all their products to soothe the irritation from shaving. This quick, easy to use skincare system gives you real results in just a few steps. Use code BroBible for 15% off. Great day on the Endless Hustle as I'm joined by the very talented, very funny, and star of one of the best shows on television right now. I'm talking about Evil, but I'm also talking about Aasif Mandvi. Congrats. Evil's back.
And it is. Yes, we are.
Congrats, man. This show's been so well received. That's got to just be a blessing.
It really is. You know, I feel like I've been around long enough to know what it feels like when shows are not well received. So when you get a show that people seem to like and people are responding to, and fans and critics seem to like it, then you're kind of like, okay, let's just keep this gravy train going for as long as possible.
You're like, Daddy needs a paycheck. Keep it going, baby.
Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going.
So now you got to walk me through this. I'm always like curious as an actor. Obviously, that first episode hits, the pilot runs, you're waiting for the ratings. What's that feeling like when you're like, all right, I know we've got a good show here, but are people actually going to give a shit? Like, what's that moment like of waiting for the, hey, did we actually get eyeballs on this thing?
Yeah, I mean, well, when we did the pilot, and the first hurdle is to sort of get ordered to series, right? And so we did, and I felt like, I think the pilot was great, and we all felt like we did a great job. And the Kings, Robert and Michelle King, are just such incredible writers, and Robert directed the pilot, and we thought we had something good, but it doesn't matter. Like, you can think you have something good, and I thought I had something good many times, and studios and networks, executives, they live in a whole bubble of their own decision making that sometimes you can't understand, and has often nothing to do with creativity or how good your show is, So it was nerve-wracking, and then we got ordered to series, which we're really excited about. And that phone call from my agents when they said, hey, you got a series order. I was actually with a bunch of friends at the time, and my phone rang, and I went out into the hallway, and I took the call like in the hallway, and then came back in, and we were having kind of it was a bunch of friends, but we were also having like a kind of a meeting. And so people were talking about like serious stuff, and like there was a whole debate, or not debate, but a conversation going on. And so I had to just kind of come in, and I was super excited, and I had to just sit on it. And I just told one person in the room, I was like, yes, and it was kind of like, yeah, oh, great. What I mean? It was like, and we couldn't really, until there was a break in the conversation, really sort of talk about the thing. But then everyone was very excited, and I was super excited. And I was really excited to work with this cast and this, and the Kings, Robert and Michelle. So it was all very exciting.
By the way, you're a better man than me, because I would have walked right in and been like, drinks on me, everybody. Let's do it. Shots.
I thought about it, and it was just one of those moments where like people were discussing like a serious topic, and I was just like, I can't come in and just be like, I got a TV show, So I waited for the right moment,
Meanwhile, it could be like out of work actors around you, and they're like, you know what?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that, it's always one of those things where, for every actor that's working, there's 10 great actors who are out of work at any given time. So of your friends, and so that's just a reality of the business. And I've been on the other side of that as well,
So then you get the season 2 order. How does that happen? And is it once you get that call, what's your reaction?
Well, that call was really special because we were pregnant and we were about to have a baby, and my wife and I had been looking at an apartment because we wanted to move out of our apartment into a larger place so that for the baby, like to have a nursery and all that stuff. And we saw this place, and And I thought, oh man, it's a little above our price range. And we were like, it's right above our price range. We don't want to spend this much, but it's a great space and it'd be really great to have a baby here and to sort of, start that whole thing here. And I remember saying, and I said to my wife, I said, if I just knew that Evil was getting a second season, I feel like I could just, put down the thing on this, we could. And that night we went home and the phone rang and it was Michelle King. And I saw her name come up on my phone. And at first I didn't answer it because I was like, oh, if she's calling me at home, it might be bad news. Like, I was like, okay, this could be that we're canceled and we're done. Like she's calling me at 9:00 at night on a Tuesday. Like this is not going to be good. And then I called it, I sort of composed myself. I got ready. I steelied myself for the bad news. And I called her and she said, guess what? I got great news. We got picked up for a second season. And at the time, we were the shortest period. Like we were the fastest pickup that CBS had ever made for a second season. We'd only aired 4 episodes at that point. And they picked us up. And it was super exciting. And it was just and anyway, of course, my wife and I were like, we're getting that apartment.
The realtor gets a call like at 2 in the morning, like
exactly.
We're gold.
We're doing it. So it just felt like a sign at that point. I was like, oh, this is a sign. Like it was all validation of the work that we had done and all the amazing, how amazing the show is and how smart and weird and funny and terrifying the show is all at once,
By the way, wrapped in with the life of an actor and going project to project and like, can I get this apartment?
Yeah.
What an incredible story. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a moment where both of us just looked at each other and we were like, okay, this is, and I remember saying to Michelle at the time, because I don't think that the Kings did not know at that point that I was having a baby. And so I remember she was on the call with me. She was like, we're getting picked up. And I was like, thank God. I was like, because I'm having a baby. and she was like, oh,
that's awesome.
It's pretty crazy.
I've always wanted to ask you about The Daily Show. I read like different stories about how you got the job. They literally threw you on the air the first night after you got the job. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, not the first. Well, I got the job. So yeah, I guess that is true. I auditioned for The Daily Show in the afternoon of August 9th, 2006. And it was this is another one of those crazy stories that I will one day put in my Hollywood Stories one-man show. It was just like, it was like I was writing a letter to my ex-girlfriend about how I was really depressed because she had just gotten engaged and I found out and I was really like hoping that we would get back or whatever. I was having one of those moments that a guy has after he screwed up a relationship. And so I was writing this letter and I remember I got the call from my agent and they were like, you have an audition for The Daily Show. And I was like, I can't do that today because I'm really sad. And so like, can I go tomorrow? I don't feel very funny, And so they were like, no, if you don't go today, it's done, just go. And then I was like, all right, fine. So I was like, what time are they seeing people till? They said, like, they'll be seeing people till like 3:30 or so. And I said, okay, I'll get there like at 3:15. And I'll, and that's when and so I put on a suit and tie, went down to the studio, which actually I used to live on the Upper West Side in Manhattan and it was just in Midtown. So it was just like, it was like 5 minutes away. So I went down, walk in, there's Jon Stewart, and I watched the show and I, obviously knew who he was. And I was having one of those days where I was just like, fuck it, fuck it all, I don't care. Like, it was just one of those days where, and sometimes those are the times when you have the best audition or the best moment because you don't give a fuck about anything. So I was just like, fuck this shit. I was like, I'm not going to get this job anyway. Like they're going to get some like comedian guy. Cause I was coming more from like a theater. I'd done a lot of comedy. I'd done sketch comedy and even a little bit of stand up, but improv sketch more, I came and I was like, they're going to get some like, stand up or something. And nah, I'm not going to get this job. So I went down and I just did like a Stephen Colbert impression, basically. I didn't know what I was doing. And they just gave me this copy. And I remember they gave me a script and I was reading it and I was going over it and I was like, oh, I gotta. And then they said, you ready? And I said, no, I really haven't had enough time with this material. I kind of need a little bit more time. And they were like, no, it's on the teleprompter. Don't worry about it. And I just remember thinking like, oh, this teleprompter. I was like, I've been on Broadway. Like, so I like was like, and so I go out there with a real attitude and then I did it. And then John said to me, he said, he never met me before. So he was like, I don't know, what you've done and what your career is, but he's like, have you ever performed in front of a live audience before, And I looked at him and I said, I've been on Broadway. And then, and then he was like, oh, okay. He was like, oh, Mr. Broadway. All right, here we go. And so I don't know why I had so much attitude, but I did. And then I did it. And then he said, you're on the show tonight. Are you ready? And it wasn't a contract yet. It was like a one-time gig, but like I was on the show that night and nobody knew I was going to be on the show. I didn't even have time to tell people. And so people were like emailing me and whatever. And they were like, there's a guy who looks like you on the Daily Show. Like, did you know this? They had a guy who looks exactly like, and I was like, and I was like, I guess I was the first non-Caucasian correspondent on the Daily Show. And to the point that the LA Times wrote a huge article about me the next day saying like the Daily Show has finally gone brown. Like they've crossed the barrier into a brown guy. And I did that for a while. And then John was just my champion at that point. And he like just kept having me back on the show. He liked me. He thought I was good, thought I was funny. And then after about 6 months of that, they offered me a contract and I started officially in 2007. But it was a crazy story. And it also happened that the night that I was on, that very night, Bruce Springsteen was in the audience of the show. And he just happened to have come by just to see the show. Like he was in town and he brought his kid and he was like, let's go see the Daily Show. And so he just came by and then he came backstage afterwards and it was my first time on the show. And he came up to me and he was like, hey, you're really good, man. You're really good. Like I heard it was your first time. And I was like, you're a good singer,
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy day. It was one of those crazy days.
You guys got to experience, I feel like that was the heyday of the Daily Show, right from when you came on to the end. That's when John became the A-list political commentator of all political commentators. I feel like the early 2000s, it was more of that cult feeling, but then the Daily Show went mainstream. When it ends up going mainstream, and his voice is one of the leading political voices in the world at that point, what's that environment like? And you guys are in the writer's room, you're dissecting what he's going to say. Did he understand his impact of what was coming out of his mouth for the next, 13, 12 years, whatever it was?
I think that there was always a sense of like, we always understood how much we were part of the zeitgeist and what a sort of force the Daily Show was, but there was always a kind of, inside the bubble of the Daily Show, there was a kind of like, we don't talk about that, almost like, we're just a little show, we're just doing our thing and we don't want to lose that. You know what I mean? Like immediately when you start taking yourself too seriously and think you are like shaping the culture in some way, is that when you collapse, And so I think there was a sort of sense of like keeping the integrity of what we were doing, which was ultimately just being a really smart comedy show dealing with topics of the day. And I think there was definitely a sense of like, we don't want to get too full of ourselves at any point, even though we were winning Emmys like every year, but there was a kind of weird, like, it was like a weird balancing act. Like we knew what was happening. And yet at the same time, it was like, la, 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 la. I don't want to think about that because you wanted to keep the integrity of just that feeling. And that's what I think made it work in some ways, was that we never really, we knew we were dealing with serious things and we knew we had important, smart, funny things to say. And we were working with incredibly smart writers and incredibly smart people on the show and funny people on the show. But it never felt like we never wanted to lose the sense of play and comedy and just the sense of fun that people, because if people weren't entertained by the show, then it would lose all of its teeth. And so at the end of the day, I think it was always about like, you know, like as smart and high and lofty and highbrow as we wanted to be, we always needed to come back to the fart jokes. We needed to come back to the, you know what I mean? Like the thing that just kept it real and kept it just like funny, you know?
By the way, John's back from his extended hiatus now, too. He's got a new show. I mean, of course, you're not going to keep him off the air. He's probably sitting there writing material for 2 years with pets and that farm he has or whatever. And he's like, I got to get fucking back on the air. I need to be back.
I'm sure he must finally now feel antsy about wanting to get back into the game. You know, I think that, you know, when I was on the show, we were in that period of like Iraq and, you know, Bush, and then into Obama and the sort of whole Obama years and all that. And then I think now that we've been in this Trump time, I'm sure there's a lot, I'm sure for him, there's a lot of stuff that he wants to say and that he's been sitting on, you know, for a long time. You know, someone like him who's as creative and smart and funny, I think you're only going to like keep him on the farm for so long, you know?
That's a fascinating thing with your career, by the way. And I didn't realize how much of a theater background you had. You then end up on The Daily Show, which you're right, is mainly a traditional, you know, hey, I'm a stand-up comic. Here's my next gig.
Yeah.
When you have to leave that, the show, obviously John leaves the show and it transitions to Trevor. Are you kind of like, oh shit, what's next? Like, I've been doing this for so long. Is it tough to find acting jobs? Do people just see you as Daily Show correspondent at that point? Like, what's it like leaving that point?
Well, it was actually interesting because I actually left before John left but I didn't officially leave. So I got a show on HBO called The Brink.
Yep.
With Jack Black and Tim Robbins. And I left to go do that. And it was Jay Roach was producing it. And I was actually in the writer's room of that show as well as being on the show. And I got this amazing gig. So I left like the year, like a few months before John did. But I was sort of like, I'll come back and I'll do occasional gigs every now and then. And so they didn't give me an official goodbye. I kind of was just like, I'll come back. I'll pop in every now and then. And then I got this other show and I moved out to LA for a while and I was doing that. And then when John finally left, I came back for the finale of John's show and all that. And then The Brink got canceled. And so then I was in this weird wasteland of like the show that I had left The Daily Show for got canceled after one season. And The Daily Show itself was no longer The Daily Show that I wanted. I didn't feel like I could go back to the new show because it felt almost like going back to high school after you've already graduated, you know,
right.
I was like Matthew McConaughey and Dazed and Confused or something, you know? And so I didn't feel like, you know, Trevor was rebranding the show in some ways. He was bringing it as he should have and was inclined to do. Like he was bringing in his own people and stuff. And so and then been a lot of changeover with Hassan coming in and Jordan Klepper and all these other guys coming in as well. So I was in this weird wasteland for a while where I didn't know what was next. And actually, strangely enough, I was getting a lot of offers for stuff that was sort of similar to The Daily Show, or like they wanted me to play that character all the time. That sort of, in fact, I got offered the role of Lemony Snicket in the Netflix series of Unfortunate Events. But it was a kind of similar sort of role in the sense that he was a narrator and he was talking to camera and he was, you know, just in a suit and tie, whatever. And he was kind of he was sort of doing the narration and it was very kind of like reportery kind of sort of thing. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something completely different. So for a while I was doing like this and that and kind of doing guest spots here and a little